My passion in starting this business was to provide opportunities for women specifically to work, whether it's remotely, whether it's at home, for children, stages, whatever. It's just giving women a way to contribute to their families, contribute to a way of life that they want in a flexible workforce.
Hey, this is Dennis Consorte with Snackable Solutions, and I am here with Nicole Grinnell. How are you, Nicole?
I'm great, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Now, did I get your last name right?
You got it right. I'll answer to anything, but you nailed it. Good job.
All right. But here's a harder one. Your company name is Bosun Solutions.
Bosun Solutions, that's right.
And tell me how you came up with that name.
Yeah, so I would love to tell you that it was like this magnificent marketing situation that we all went through, but I watch Below Deck, which is a reality show. And on the show, and it's all about essentially the staffing of yachting. And they would talk about this position called the bosun. And that position was really the right hand of the captain. And that person was in charge of the equipment, of the crew, of the guests, everything. And everything ran through the bosun. And so when we were looking at kind of building our company and we actually went through a rebranding, I kept thinking of that because I thought we want to be the bosun for business owners. We want you to be able to be the captain of your business and be the leader of it and let us execute on those things. So that's really how the name came about, reality television. But I really just got my wheels turning like that is essentially what business owners need.
It makes sense to me. And your business is all about remote staffing, is that correct?
Yeah, so we really build what we call remote teams. So we're not a traditional staffing company. We really are just providing the team in a remote basis for the business owner. But our core belief is that your labor line should always be tied to revenue. So instead of a fixed labor expense like traditional employment, where it's a full time or a part time position, we believe that that should be able to fluctuate based on what's going on with your business and keep you more lean and profitable.
Now, what kinds of businesses would benefit most from your services?
You know, it's funny. I was just having this conversation the other day with a financial advisor, and she was like, well, have you thought about getting into this or this? And the funny thing is, we see businesses all the way from the fencing company that's in Indiana to the Manhattan law firm. But when you pull behind the curtain of a business, we're all the same. There are still operational functions. They may look different. We may use different systems, but we all need to show up and service our clients. We all need to show up and respond to them. We need to bill them. We need to be providing a service, and we need to have processes for that. And so that's really what we do.
Now, over the past 2 years, we've had a huge transformation of the way in which we work, and many companies were forced to switch to more of a remote workforce. I feel like it just accelerated what was happening anyway, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts, and what are some of the challenges that people face with working with remote workers?
So I tell everybody, people ask me this a lot, like, how is this affecting your business? What does that look like? The first thing that has been a benefit to our company is there was always an education hurdle. So people assumed, like, how do I really know that they're working? What if they're just watching TV all day? Well, now that you've essentially forced everyone to work at home, everyone understands, like, you're actually working like 20% more. I mean, your office is always there. You have to really structure your day to have a work life and a home life. So that kind of education hurdle that this can be done remotely has been removed through this pandemic. But for people that have now been forced to go into remote life, managing a remote team is very different than in office. So we are having to kind of coach clients who haven't done that before or were kind of forced into it and really helping them understand, which I know is kind of the snackable solution, how to delegate remotely when you don't have that person sitting outside your desk to be like, hey, Bob, come in here. Let me show you this and like what that looks like.
Yeah, I think these are important questions to ask. So I'll try to save most of that for the end so that we can wrap it up in a bow with your snackable solution. I do want to ask you, when it comes to remote workers, let's flip it around. Let's talk about them instead of the employer. What does it mean to be a remote worker? So, and I'll give you an example. Some people thrive in an environment where they're surrounded by people, they're surrounded by the energy of an office. I'm personally the opposite of that. I like having my own little space to just do stuff and focus on my work. How do different people handle these situations as remote workers?
I would say it's not for everyone. What you just said is like what we experience. The biggest thing that we look for is you have to be a self starter. The reality is, you don't have someone walking in every day saying, Sally, I need you to do this today. Especially in our world where the client is remote, the assistant is remote, we may not even be in the same time zone. You really have to have that initiative to help your client learn to delegate, be able to see tasks where they're not able to delegate that directly. And there's not maybe a task list you're walking into. A self starter, lots of motivation, looking for ways that they can serve. I would say that's really what we look for in our team.
And then do you give, and maybe this is part of your solution at the end, but do you give advice to your clients as far as really helping remote workers to feel like they're part of the team?
hmm Yeah, I say a lot, like, we don't want you looking at us like we're a call center, a data bank where it's just real non-human behind there. Like, we are part of your team. So just like you're including maybe traditional employees that you have, this team member needs to be a part of that. So there needs to be time for that communication, the personal interactions. Even with our team, we like to start off our meetings with just kind of 5 minutes of, round robin, what's going on in your world, how are things, like, you need to have that interpersonal connection as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in fact, we're in the middle of the great resignation. I'm sure you've heard of this, where millions of Americans and people around the world are quitting their jobs. Are you getting some of those people coming to you and saying, hey, Nicole, I want to be a remote worker. What do I do?
Yeah, kind of in a different way. We're seeing more that people are drawing really clear boundaries on what they will and won't do. Time parameters, and it's a big thing. Like, hey, no longer are you contacting me after 5 o'clock. So we're seeing more people drawing healthy boundaries, saying this is really what I can commit to, which honestly, there's benefit in that, because what we don't want to do is get the like, sure, I'll do that, I'll do that. And ultimately, it's resentment. They're not enjoying it. It's not a good fit for the client. So we're finding people more really taking their time to make sure it's a good fit, not only on the client side, but as the contractor and the team member.
Now, there are a number of different platforms where you can work with remote workers, and some of them are more US centric, some are more international. What makes your platform unique and your talent different than maybe, or maybe it's the experience that's different than these other platforms?
Yeah, so I would describe what makes us unique as not maybe necessarily a platform or a technology, but we want to be able to be a support to the business owner. So, where we saw in the beginning a lot of businesses that were maybe even similar to ours, it was really more of a staffing, like you mentioned, and like Bob meet Sally, have a good life together. And I knew that business owners, especially the ones we're servicing, like entrepreneurs or solo practitioners, whatever that may be, you're kind of on an island, and it can be a lonely feeling when you are a solo leader. And in fact, it's funny, one of our relationships managers is chatting me currently and said, we really should offer that we have therapy in these roles. And so we wanted to be able to have that consulting advantage to you where you can call up and just say, things are going great with her, but I really don't know how to move to the next step. Or what do you think the new role could be? So it's almost free business consulting when you join kind of the Bosun team, because we want to be there to support you. It only makes all of us look better when everybody's rising and your business is growing. And so we really wanted to offer more of the support side as opposed to just a traditional staffing model. We really want you to feel like family.
And when it comes to measuring value, a lot of small business owners, they think in terms of what does this cost me and what do I get? Are there different ways to measure value with your team, and how do you show your clients that you're bringing them value?
That's a question we get quite a lot. So I would say on our first kind of sales or onboarding call, what we do is we break it down and say, like, what is a win to you? Like, what is a win to you, Dennis? Whether it's I want to be off every day at 5 o'clock, or I want to just be able to walk away from my invoicing process. I just need someone to handle that. My mind can't go to math at the end of the day. So we want to define what you are hoping to win out of this relationship. then that's where our check-ins come in. So we can say, hey, Dennis, I know we talked about that it was very important you to be off at 5. How is that? Where does that goal stand right now? Okay, great. Sally's taking so much off of your plate that you've been quitting by 4 o'clock. Great. So that's really the value that we want to focus on, not necessarily like, where is there an ROI that we can quantify on what she's bringing to your business, but what is the goal for you? What are you looking to delegate personally and professionally to get you to where you need to be?
I think that makes great sense. And another thing that I hear from people is that it's harder to trust workers when you don't see them face to face in an office, when you have that separation. What would you say to people who have these trust issues? How do they feel really good about the people they're working with?
Well, we get that a lot. For those cases, we really like to say, hey, before we even commit, before we give out a password, let's do some calls together. Let's allow you the chance to talk with her, get to know her more, really where we feel like she would be good on your account, but let's give you that opportunity to hear from her. And so it's almost more of an interview meet and greet situation. So you can understand, I mean, just like you and I are talking, it's a real person behind there. Hear about their experience, all of that. And so we want them to feel that going into the relationship. And that's really why we do match directly. So you are not sharing 3 assistants and you're not sure who's picking things up. You have a direct relationship with the person that you've been assigned to.
Now, what about you personally, Nicole? What really motivates you about your business? What are you most passionate about when you think about where your company is today and where it's going to be a few years from now?
Yeah, this is going to sound really weird because it's probably not what most people get motivated by. But because we're in this season right now, when I see we finish out a year and we send out all of the W-2, 1099s, everything, and I see that number, that is what excites me, which is opposite because that's my expense, right? But what excites me about it is my passion in starting this business was to provide opportunities for women specifically to work, whether it's remotely, whether it's at home for children, stages, whatever. And so that is really exciting to me because I come from small business. I was a woman staying at home with my children. These types of opportunities weren't available. And so that is what really motivates me is just giving women a way to contribute to their families, contribute to a way of life that they want in a flexible workforce.
I feel like you might have a story to tell about maybe one of the people on your team or even yourself. I don't know. You kind of hinted at it where you described there are a lot of women who have challenges being able to physically go to a location because they have other responsibilities too. Is there a story that comes to mind about that, how someone's life was transformed by this?
Well, it's funny because even within our own team, our operations coordinator, Sarah, she was kind of in that role. When she came to us, she started with us 5 years ago and she was newly married, had one infant child, and she had left the workforce to be able to do that. But she had this passion for working with businesses, loves small businesses. And she started with us in just kind of a project role. She was doing recruiting for a client. And we saw like, hey, you're actually really great at this. Like, could we bring you in for some operations stuff? And it's just grown. And now she's our operations director. And we've gone through 2 pregnancies together. She now has a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so we've been able to go through maternity leaves together and see her family grow. And she's been able to provide for them while always being able to keep her children and her family her focus. In fact, today they've gotten snow up in Ohio. And she said, hey, everything's done for the morning. I'm taking a break. We're going to go build snowmans out front. And so, like, I love that. I love that win that she has that and can still be mom.
That's wonderful. And you said that she's an operations director. So does that mean that some of the delegation happens internal to your organization and some happens externally with your clients, or what does that look like?
So her role specifically is for Bosun. And so what she does for us is essentially all of our onboarding, all of our operations process, takes care of all of the team members that are coming on, make sure that everyone is set up correctly. So she's kind of internal doing that for us day to day. So she's client facing and contractor facing.
Well, that's great. Okay, so that brings us to our snackable solution. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what happens externally because you've got a really great solution. So tell our audience what that is and what steps they need to take.
So I think delegation is something that all business owners struggle with. And so there's just two things, honestly, that I think you just need is just communicate and set expectations. I can't tell you how many people are frustrated and it's not working. And I'll say, have you communicated this to them? Well, no. Do they understand that this is the expectation? Well, not really. Okay, so we can't hold somebody to an expectation that we haven't communicated to them. So even at a very first step, communicate what you're looking to get done, set the expectation around that, and the rest will start snowballing from there.
That's great advice. And when it comes to communication, how much should be the responsibility of, let's say, the business owner, and how much should be the responsibility of the worker?
Honestly, I feel like it's 50-50. I was an executive assistant before I started this business, and I always joke that I think I would be like 10 times better now having been a business owner because I can understand what it feels like to be in their shoes. So a lot of times when team members are saying, he's just not communicating or this is frustrating me or whatever, I say the same thing back to them. Have you communicated that to them? Because business owners are busy. There's so much on their plate. There's so much buying for their time. There are fires they're putting out every day that unless you are communicating that to them and saying, hey, this really isn't working for me, or could we talk about this? It's not on their radar. And yeah, in a dream world, they're checking in weekly. We're doing monthly reviews. Everybody's hugging and things are great, but that's just not reality. And so taking that time, even internally, we highly suggest weekly check-ins, even if it's just a 10-minute call. What's on your plate? What's on your radar? What do you plan to get done this week? But communication it solves so much.
Yeah, that's great advice. And the last piece, maybe you already answered this, but I'd love if you could elaborate just for another 30 seconds. When it comes to communication, it comes to setting expectations, what do you do when you feel like you've exhausted many of the solutions, when you've tried to communicate, when you've tried to set expectations, but they're just not being met? What's the next step?
You mean as far as like a team member is not meeting expectations?
Yeah, like how do you get them motivated to be more engaged?
I'm not going to say that every relationship just ends, running off, skipping hand in hand. That does happen. And sometimes if there's, we are a big believer in chemistry. So it may just be a level where like, you're saying the sky's blue, I'm seeing it as yellow. And that may be a time that we have to transition that account. Internally, how Bosun supports you in that is that we actually absorb all that training costs. So we always say we're in the business of the people. We can't predict everything. But if that is something that we would have to transition, Bosun absorbs that cost. We get someone trained up to speed, and then we hopefully have a better match going forward.
Oh, that sounds very fair. It feels like you're reducing the risk that a small business owner might have with taking on new staff.
Yeah, I mean, staffing is hard. It's hard to, like I said, we're in the people business. You never know what's going to happen, but we want to kind of eliminate some of that risk where we can and understand that, if it's not a great match at first, then that's on us. We want to own it and take care of that for you because we understand that downtime is crucial. And so that's really where we kind of step in to support the business owner.
Nicole, this is great information. How do people find out more about you and Bosun online?
Yeah, so you can check us out at Bosun Solutions, which is Bosun. You can submit your form through there. We'd love to offer your listeners a waive of the onboarding fee, which is essentially a $300 value. So if they put in there they came from Snackable Solutions, we will waive that for them.
That sounds great to me. And they can spend that money on snacks.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great information. And I really look forward to seeing what happens with your company in the future.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, Dennis.